Hi. Hi. Oh, I'll do that one again. Hi. Hi. That was really good. Awesome. Hey, welcome. My name's Ken. Glad to have you here today. And whether you're watching online down at our Kitchener campus or at our main auditorium in Waterloo, we're really, really glad that you're here today as we kind of wrap up a little three-part series that we've been doing called Simply Overloaded. Can you say that with me? Overloaded, overloaded. And so often in our lives, we can be overloaded with junk that can really mess us up. So the first week, we were talking about being overloaded with regrets about my past. Because sometimes our past can play havoc with our present. We've got things we did or didn't do, said or didn't say, that can really weigh heavy on us in the present. And it's no fun being like that, right? That's being overloaded with our past, regrets about our past. Last Sunday, we talked about being overloaded with stress about my present. You know, we get those plates spinning, we got all those things happening in our world right now, and sometimes we can be absolutely overloaded with that, and God has a way of speaking to us about that. This morning, we're going to be talking about overloaded with fears about my future, fears about what may be lying ahead of me, fears about what may be down the road, and sometimes those can be extremely paralyzing, and if you're overloaded in any way with some of those kinds of fears, we want to talk about that today. So if you open up the Bible and you were to search through it, and count up the number of the one thing that's commanded more frequently than any other command in the Bible, you'd find that it's not love God, and it's not worship God, it's not spoil your pastor. In fact, actually, that's not found at all in the Bible, which concerns me. But anyways, that's not found there either. What you're going to find is that the number one command in the Bible is this one: fear not. 80 times those two words are put together in the Bible. Fear not, fear not, fear not. And then there's derivatives of that phrase or other phrases like it, like about 30 times it says, do not be afraid, or don't get your shirt in a knot, that kind of thing. Cool your jets, that's found a lot of times in the Bible. So what's really been going on here is that God is saying to us, hey, look it, there's an issue that we have, and the issue that we have is this thing called fear. Fear is a big deal. Fear gets at us. There is a Phobia Society of America in the U.S., and they have like 3,500 members, and they called this big conference of all of their members to attend, and only 200 showed up. And the reason was because some of them were afraid to fly, and some of them were afraid of big crowds and everything like that. So it's kind of an interesting sort of thing. And all of us understand fear at some level or another, right? There are fears that we have. We know what fear is like, and we struggle with it. And all of us have those kinds of things, those kinds of fears in our lives. In fact, people with really tall foreheads came up with some big, long names about certain kinds of fears. So arachnophobia is the fear of spiders. Yeah, it's more than spiders, but we tend to think about spiders. How about acrophobia? It's the fear of heights. Or what about aerophobia? It's the fear of flying. Or how about this one? Poundophobia. That's the fear of buttons. Sorry. Or how about this one? Hippopotomonstrosesquipedaliophobia. Worked all week on that one. It's the fear of long words. Makes sense, right? You can't say it, you're never going to be afraid of it. And then there's this one here, phobophobia. Phobophobia is just the plain old fear of fear. And a lot of us have fear. Now, fear is an interesting sort of thing because fear can be fun. Fear can be fun. You ever done that with somebody who's watching a movie and it's kind of a scary part? You put your hand on their shoulder just at that moment. That was fun, at least for me. But actually, when we go to some of those, go to Wonderland, right? We pay to get scared. Right? We pay, go ahead, I'm going to go on that ride and be freaked right out. Go ahead, I'm going to pay for this because it's fun, right? Or sometimes fear can be, it can protect us. So maybe when you were coming this morning, you realize the roads were slippery and you're afraid you're going to maybe get in an accident, so you're driving a little more cautious. Fear can protect us. Fear can also hurt us. How many of you had the Amber Alert this morning? Okay, there was a little bit of fear that went through you. My friend did that, and now he's lost his job. But I just do it for me, so he did it just for us today. No, not really. So sometimes fear can really, really hurt us too, right? I mean, sometimes we can be afraid, and it can paralyze us. Sometimes fear can be so deep and entrenched and constant that it can cause physiological problems in our lives. We can experience that kind of fear. So what is fear? Let me give you a definition. Fear is a present experience of anxious feelings caused by our anticipation of a painful future imagined event or an actual experience. So it's a present experience of anxiety about something that may happen or is going to happen in the future. It's a present experience about something that is going to happen down the road. It isn't about the past. I don't get afraid about the past unless what I did in the past is going to impact my future, and then I'm afraid of it. Like if CRA, Canada Revenue, comes at me, okay, I might be afraid of that. But the fact of the matter is that it's something I'm experiencing in the present. It's an anxiety in the present about an imagined or real event in the future. A real event might be surgery I'm booking, and I know it's going to happen, so I'm anxious about that. We all experience that at a certain level. Or it might be something that's imagined. But even though I feel the fear now, it's about something that's about to happen. Even if I'm sliding on the road in a skid, the fear I'm feeling initially is more about what can happen or could happen when the accident takes place. So fear is always something that happens in the present about an imagined or real experience in the future. And how do we deal with this thing called fear? Because the Bible's really clear that it happens to all of us, and all of us recognize this is the case. So how do we deal with it? How do we handle the fear that can so grip our lives? And I'm going to give you the answer right now, and it's a simple thing for me to say, but it's not a simple thing for us to embrace. And it goes like this: the antidote to fear is faith. It is faith in God's faithfulness. The antidote to fear is faith. It is faith in God's faithfulness. So there's a verse in Psalm 34:4 that reads, I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and he delivered me from all my fears. So here's the psalmist writing and saying, I had these fears, these paralyzing fears about I was experiencing them in the present, about something I imagined or was going to happen in the future, and God came along and he took those fears away, which is something all of us would long to experience. Or even if he could just help us dial them down a bit, that would be something that we would love, right? The antidote to fear is faith. It is faith in God's faithfulness. So God is a God who is faithful. God's faithfulness is intrinsic to who he is. He is by nature faithful. So if I took a red marker and put a red mark on a sheet of paper, the nature or the characteristic of the red marker is that it writes red. Can I take a red marker and write blue? The answer is no, because the characteristics of a red marker are to write red. The characteristics of God is that he is faithful. Can he be anything other than faithful? Can a red pen write green? The answer is no. God is faithful. It's intrinsic to who he is. So I am putting my faith in a characteristic of God called faithfulness. He can be nothing other than faithful. That's what God is. And I have this little line that I came up with a few years ago about God's faithfulness. This is how I want to define it again this morning for us. It goes like this: he is all the time to me. Okay? God's faithfulness to me is this truth: he is all that he is all the time to me. That's his faithfulness. Can you say it with me, please? He is all the time to me. So if I can come to grips with who he is, and I can understand that he is all the time to me, that can really help me with my fear. That can really help me with my anxiety. Because this God who is great and immense and perfect and beautiful and faithful loves me and will be all he is all the time to me. That's a promise that he made. And so what I want to do this morning is I want to look at a chapter in the Bible that's probably one of the most well-known chapters in all of the Bible. People have this hanging on their walls. They have etched it into stone. They have memorized it. They have studied it. They've examined it. They've sung it. They've done all kinds of things. I'm sure you've heard of this chapter. It's found in Psalm number 23. You got a Bible, you want to turn there, and maybe you get a pen out, or if you got an electronic device, we're going to highlight, we're going to walk through this psalm. We're going to go through all 6 verses in a cursory kind of way because we don't have a whole lot of time. But as we're going through this chapter, which is famous and very well known, sometimes you know things about a certain thing, but you know the chapter, but you've never spent time sort of applying it to your lives. And I'm hoping this morning that we can do that. So here's what I'm going to do before we actually dive into the psalm. I want to talk about the style of psalm, or the category of psalm, the type of psalm that it is. I want to talk about the story in the psalm, because this particular psalm has a story to it. Not all of them do. This one does. I think it's cool to look at it. I want to talk about the structure of the psalm. There's a particular structure. You understand the structure, you're going to understand the psalm better, and then we're just going to study it. So we're going to look at the style, we're going to look at the story, we're going to look at the structure, and then we're just going to kind of do a really quick study of the psalm. So let's talk about the style or the type or the category of psalm. There are 150 psalms, and you can take those psalms and you can divide them into various categories, and one of the ways that you can divide them is the way I want to show you. Some of the psalms are called lament psalms. Some of the psalms are called confidence psalms, and some of the psalms are called thanksgiving psalms. Lament, confidence, and thanksgiving. Now, a lament psalm, there are many of them. They're scattered around throughout the psalms. Lament psalms are psalms where the writer is crying out to God, lamenting to God, calling out to God, why, God, did you let this happen? Why didn't you act this way? I'm in a lot of trouble. I'm filled with anxiety and fear. And they just expose their heart in very vivid ways. And many times when you're hurting, going and reading a lament psalm can be very helpful because you're right where that author is. You're feeling the same kind of pain. You've got the same kind of questions. Maybe you've got the same degree or kind of fear that they're experiencing. Another kind of psalm is called the thanksgiving psalm. A thanksgiving psalm is a psalm that's written not out of a place of fear, but of a place perhaps of looking back on what was a fearful and troubling experience and saying how great God is, how thankful they are for God, how wonderful God is. This is a psalm of thanksgiving to God for who he is and what he's done, and it's a beautiful, beautiful psalm. And when we get to that point, we need to be reading those psalms too and using them as a way of expressing our thanks to God. God, you're amazing. God, you're powerful. God, you're beautiful. God, you've got it all in control. That's a wonderful thing to do. Then we have confidence psalms. They're kind of stuck between lament and thanksgiving in the sense that the confidence psalm is the psalm in which the author is expressing a time in which there could be a little bit of fear, a little bit of trouble in their lives, or maybe it's not there. But what they're doing is expressing how confident they are in God, how great God is. It's being in the present and looking in one sense down the road toward the future. I'm confident God's going to be with me. I'm confident God is going to keep me. Now, when we come to Psalm 23, guess which one it is? Any ideas? Yeah, it's the confidence psalm, right? It's a psalm of confidence. The writer may have a little bit of fear in his life, maybe a troubling situation, we're not sure, or there may not be at all. But what he's doing is he's expounding upon the wonder of who God is. And his confidence in God is something he's enunciating. And as a result of that, he's just extolling God, and it gives him great strength to move into the future. It's a great psalm to read. Psalm 23 is like that. That's the style. It's a confidence psalm. The second thing we want to talk about is the story in the psalm, because Psalm 23 has a story. That's a unique kind of thing. And I think one of the reasons that Psalm 23 has become so profoundly powerful is because of the imagery and the intimacy and just the way that it speaks to our heart. It's just a profoundly beautiful story. So let me tell you one way of understanding Psalm 23, and that's this. The voice, the speaker in Psalm 23 is a sheep. And the sheep is doing all the talking. The sheep is standing, if you can imagine this imagery, in a pasture with ankle-deep, luscious green grass. This sheep his head is up, it's alert, its eyes are clear, its wool is clean and thick, it is healthy and strong and well-fed. And this sheep is standing against a Middle Eastern wall, which would be made of just stones piled up a certain height to keep the pastures separate. And the sheep is looking over this stone fence into another pasture that's barren and rocky, and the sheep that are in that pasture are ill and sick, they're thin, their wool is filled with stones and dirt and branches and so on and so forth, their eyes are runny. And for the first half of Psalm 23, the healthy sheep who's doing the speaking is shouting over the stone fence at these other sheep, bragging about its shepherd. And then halfway through Psalm 23 in verse 4, the sheep turns and looks at the shepherd who's now standing beside it and begins to talk directly to the shepherd. So talk to the sheep in the other pasture, then turn and talk to the shepherd. That's the outline or the flow of what's happening in Psalm 23. So it goes like this. You have to imagine, he's yelling now. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemy. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Psalm 23 is a sheep shouting out how great the shepherd has been, and then turning and speaking to the shepherd himself. So the style, it's a confidence psalm. The story is a story of a sheep. The structure of this psalm is really interesting as well. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Can you say that with me, please? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. This is the opening statement, and this is the statement upon which everything else rests. So because the Lord is my shepherd, then he's going to do this, and he's going to do this, and he's going to do this, and he's going to do this. And so the confidence comes out of that claim that this is the shepherd. So everything modifies this statement all the way through for the rest of the other 5 verses. Modifies the statement, the Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd, therefore I don't have to be afraid because he does this and this and this and this in my life. So understand that claim. I hope you can make that claim. Now I'm going to show you what the shepherd will do for you. Well, what we need to do then is kind of study it real quickly. We're going to go through these 6 verses in a fast way to hopefully learn how that we can conquer this fear in our lives by simply taking Psalm 23 and making the same claims the sheep is making. So let's look at it this way. I do not have to live in fear because the Lord, first of all, is with me. The Lord is with me. This is what verse 1 says. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Can you read it to me again? You ready? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Now, if you've been around Creekside long enough, you know that the 4 letters, L-O-R-D, when they're all capitalized, are not a translation, they're a replacement. In other words, instead of translating the word, they've replaced the Hebrew word with the words with all the L-O-R-D capitalized. Sometimes there's all small case L-O-R-D, sometimes there's a capital L, small O-R-D. This is a unique word which the Jews would not speak, the scribes, so we don't know how to say it. For a long time we thought it was Jehovah. Now we believe it's Yahweh. It is a name for God. And so what I like to do here is I'm going to scratch out the Lord and I'm going to write the words Yahweh in there. And what the author is saying, what he said was, Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not want. He's being very personal. It's very intimate here. It's different than saying, the plumber is my friend, is a lot different than saying, Bob is my friend. There's an intimacy that happens when you use the name. And what's happening in Psalm 23 is he's using God's name. Yahweh is my shepherd. Yahweh. Wow. And you have to understand that the scribes were afraid to say this. That's why we lost how to say this name. They would write it, sometimes using a different pen even. Okay, Yahweh is my shepherd. Yahweh is my shepherd. Yahweh is my shepherd. Yahweh is my shepherd. And the question is, can you say that? Can you say, Yahweh is my shepherd? Do you have that kind of relationship with him? Is he yours? Do you know him that way? Because that's why Jesus came, so that we could know Yahweh as our shepherd, as the one who guides our life and walks with us. Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not want. Now, for the longest time, I'm talking years, I did not know what to do with that phrase. If Yahweh is your shepherd, am I not supposed to want anything? Like, any of you got wants out there? You want to eat, you want to get some new clothes, you want to go on vacation. Like, what does this mean, I shall not want? In fact, in some translations, and you can do this legitimately, they wrote, Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not have any needs. Because he's my shepherd, he's going to take care of the needs in my life. My shelter, my food, protection, so on and so forth. Until he doesn't, and that means I'm going to go to heaven then, so he's still caring for my need then. So that might be a way of sort of interpreting this, right? I'd like to throw something different at you, okay? And you know, The danger with what I'm about to say is that I don't know anybody else who says what I'm just about to say. Couldn't find it anywhere, so there's always a danger that, woohoo, where are you coming from, Ken, on this? But let me tell you how I'm sort of seeing this and see if this makes sense to you. I think the way of understanding it is this. Yahweh is my shepherd. I shall not want any other shepherd. Yahweh is my shepherd. When I've got Yahweh, I shall not want any other shepherd, because you know what happens to us, right? We are beings that look for shepherds. We look for people or things to take care of us. If I just had money, that's going to bring meaning and success to my life. If I just get this position, if I just follow that religion, that will be the shepherd in my life, the thing that will take care of me. And what I believe could be being said here is, no, Yahweh is my shepherd. I don't want no other one. There isn't another shepherd who's as good as this shepherd. There's not another shepherd who can do for you what this shepherd can do. When it comes to fear, you want Yahweh. And I'm going to show you how, and that's when he goes into verses 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Yahweh is my shepherd. I don't want any other shepherd. He's the one I want. He's the one I need to follow. He's the one that I need to embrace. So the first thing that's being told us is that you don't have to live in fear, because Yahweh is with me. I've got the best shepherd, and he can conquer and do better things than anything else or anyone else. Yahweh is with me. Secondly, he guides me. He guides me. So you notice what he says. He makes me lie down in green meadows. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. He makes me lie down in green meadows. You can see it being fed, and then leads me beside quiet waters for refreshment, for thirst, for quietness, for rest. He restores my soul. There's an interesting thing that happens to sheep, that when they get flipped up on their backs, they cannot flip themselves back over, and they can die on their backs. And the shepherds will often come and restore the sheep up on its feet again. He takes me when I've stumbled and fallen, and he restores my soul, the deep inner part of me. He brings restoration. He guides me in paths of righteousness. He takes me in ways that are right, in righteous ways, in ways that line up with who he is for his name's sake. And you find this beautiful picture here of all that the shepherd does. Are you experiencing that? Is our shepherd only able to bring good things when circumstances are good? Or can he, even in the midst of tough times, bring rest, peace, strength, confidence, and so on? If you're going through a fearful time, can God bring you rest in the middle of that? And this is something that you guys are teaching me a lot. I mean, hopefully I'm learning it too, but I know many of you who are going through difficult times, fear-filled times. I'm going to lose my job. Do I going to have enough money? What about my health? What about my friends? What about my marriage? What about my kids? What about? And then I find that even though there is that anxiety that's there, that fear that's there, that it starts to go down as you realize the shepherd can take you, even in the middle of difficult times, to places where you can find that rest and that peace and that strength and that confidence. And I don't know how many times I've been blown away, even though I'm the guy who teaches this, by how some of you have responded in the hospitals and in doctor's offices and at funeral sites and in funeral homes and losses that were huge. And yet there can be within you this sense that the shepherd's with me. And yeah, there's a little bit of fear, but it's not what it would be if it wasn't for me just resting in him and just trusting in him and letting him take me through this, And that's just so important for us to experience. And when you have the shepherd and you know that he is all the time to me, that can bring you that sense of peace and that rest. You notice that he guides me, he also protects me. So the text says, even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You notice the darkness that's here in this passage. Verse 4, the valley of the shadow of death. I'm not going to fear any evil there. And then preparing a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Isn't it interesting that the psalm doesn't say he doesn't let me go through the valley of the shadow of death, or he isn't with me when I go before the enemy. The truth is that God is with me, the shepherd is with me, even when I go through this valley, even when I'm in front of the enemies. There are theologians talk about two ways of describing the characteristics or the attributes of God. And depending on how you label it, sometimes they'll label some of the attributes the greatness of God, and other attributes the goodness of God. And the greatness of God would be those attributes of all-powerful. They call it omnipotence, where God is large and in charge. Or omnipresence, where he's everywhere, fully there. He's fully present everywhere. Or omniscience, he knows everything. And we've got all these great characteristics of God. And then we talk about other characteristics of God, like his mercy and his love and his faithfulness. And what theologians will teach us is that God's great attributes empower his good attributes. So the faithfulness of God is connected to the fact that God is all-powerful. He is everywhere present. He is all-knowing. So his faithfulness knows where we're going, or he can be faithful in where we're going because he knows the future, he controls the future, he is in the future. So he's going to be faithful all the way through that. That's how powerful he is. What we find here, that instead of avoiding the valley of the shadow of death or the presence of our enemies, God takes us right there. I mean, it would be, I think, easier to avoid the valley than go in the valley, or avoid the enemies than go before the enemies. But what our God does, and this is what the Psalm says, he actually goes there with us. So that in the face of our enemies, if we're really realizing who he is, embracing him, practicing his presence, then we can know a lowering of our fear in the middle of those dark, dark times because of who's with us, right? Because he is all the time to me. And the more that I know him and embrace him and worship him and love him and understand him, the greater my capacity to take this truth and make it real in my life. No matter what the situation that I'm facing, there can be a peace that's there. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I've seen this. He protects me, he blesses me. Now look at the passage. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Here's the sheep talking. You anoint my head with oil would be possibly for healing, keeping bugs away. There's a number of reasons why we did it. Then the metaphor gets kind of a little strange here. My cup overflows. We don't quite know what that means. We're struggling to understand how that fits in with the imagery of a sheep. But let me just suggest he's blessing us, and to the point where our blessing overflows. And for some of us, I think one of the fears we have is God, can God use me? Can God do things? Does God bless me? Does God want to bless others through me? And the truth of the matter is that's what he wants to do. And the closer that I am to the shepherd, the more I can realize that not only will he bless me, but he'll use me to bless other people. I can be used that way. I can touch the lives of other people because the shepherd wants to do that in my life. He's with me, he guides me, he protects me, he blesses me. And the last one, he keeps me. Here's what we read in verse 6. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Yahweh forever. It's interesting, he bookends Psalm 23. The first word is Yahweh, and then the second last word is Yahweh. He bookends the two together. But there's an imagery here that's kind of interesting. So here's the sheep walking, and if the sheep stops and turns and looks over its shoulder, it sees two beautiful goodness characteristics of God following. His goodness, his good characteristics, his goodness and his unfailing love. His chesed is the Hebrew word. His unfailing love, his goodness follows me. I look back there, I see it. If I'm looking and I'm staying close to the shepherd, I can actually see the good things he's done in my life. When I look back at what the shepherd has done, I can see his unfailing love over and over in my life. Even if I turned away from him and rebelled against him, it's there. So I'm walking as a sheep, looking back over my shoulder, his goodness, his unfailing love. But then I can look ahead, and what do I see? I will dwell in the house of Yahweh forever. I'm going to be with the shepherd forever and ever and ever. And when you sandwich your life that way, by looking back at his goodness and his unfailing love, and ahead at being in his house forever, and recognizing he's walking with me all the way, it can take the fear in our lives and really push the RPMs down. The Lord, Yahweh, is my shepherd. I shall not want any other shepherd, because he's going to do these, he does these amazing things in my life. And David, the author of this psalm, had all those experiences of tremendous times when fear would have gripped him. And yet as he sits and writes this psalm, he does so with a full recognition of all of his life and recognizes what the shepherd has done. If you got a fear that God has abandoned you, that God is not with you, you need to understand Psalm 23. He is all the time to you. He's your shepherd. If you have a fear that there's no purpose or direction to your life, know that he's there to guide you. He wants to guide you. As you make decisions, he will go with you. If you have this fear of feeling vulnerable to the enemies around you, know that he's going to protect you. Know that he's going to do that. He'll go with you right there. If you have a fear that your life doesn't matter, know that he blesses you and wants to use your life as a blessing in the lives of others. If you have a fear of death and where you are heading, know that he has a plan for you to live with him forever. And there's something that just happens when we are able to take this truth about our shepherd and make it very real in our lives. There's something that just is so profoundly powerful when it comes to this issue of fear. He is all the time to me. That's what Psalm 23 is telling us. He's faithful. Can you say it with me one more time? You ready? He is all the time to me. And if I can look back on my life, I'll see his goodness, his unfailing love, and I can look ahead and just so embrace those two realities. You bow your heads with me in prayer. Thank you, Father, for caring for us. Thank you for this psalm that speaks so clearly about our shepherd. And I think of people in the room right now that are afraid, the fears around perhaps their health, fears around perhaps money, or maybe it's a marriage. There's a fear around whatever it may be. Lord, I pray that they would remember who you are and that you are their shepherd and you are with them. And may that truth just give them a strength. May the anxiety be lessened. May they grow closer and closer to you so that Psalm 23 could become very vivid and very real in their lives. Thank you for being that kind of God. And I pray, Lord, that our understanding of you might grow more and more and that you would bless us in tremendous ways because of this. And I ask it all in Christ's name. Amen.